Well, joining us on the broadcast is our managing editor, Zakir Jacob, tracking that first state visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States, live from New York. Good morning, Zakir. Thank you for joining us. We'll just try and connect with Zakir. I believe there's some problem with that connection. But as I said earlier, in just about 90 minutes, the Prime Minister is expected to make a landing. And right after he lands on the U.S. soil, there's a very warm welcome that has been planned by the Indian diaspora and the community. It's a power-packed schedule. The Prime Minister is expected to meet a host of people, right from Elon Musk to various people from the business community, people from arts, cinema, entertainment. It's a slew of hosts and dignitaries who have lined up to meet the Prime Minister. As I said earlier, this is indeed a moment for India, keeping in mind that various superpowers across the world are looking towards India with renewed hope and enthusiasm, keeping in mind that looking at the South Asian region right now, with disturbances in countries like Myanmar, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India is the only ray of hope. And amidst all of this turbulence, India could be looked at and always has been looked at as a long-term strategic partner by the US. And could that reliance further increase to contain the expansionist policies of China? Zakir Jacob back with us on the broadcast live from New York. Good morning, Zakir. The Prime Minister lands in about 90 minutes from now. And first would be a very warm welcome by the Indian diaspora, the Indian community.
That's correct. They're going to be here. We're outside the Lotte New York Palace Hotel, where the Prime Minister and the official Indian delegation will be staying. So good morning to you from Madison Avenue here in New York City. The Prime Minister will land at JFK, which is about an hour away from here at Long Island, in about an hour and a half from now, at about 1 o'clock local time. There will be a small gathering of Indian Americans there at the airport, but the larger one, the larger diaspora gathering, is going to be outside the Lotte Hotel here. And I'm given to understand that every time the Prime Minister has come here, mind you, he has come 6 times since 2014. Every time he comes here, he comes to the Lotte Hotel and he stays here. At least his engagements here in New York City are based out of the Lotte Hotel. This is in Madison Avenue and 50th West Street. Here in New York, in the second half of the day, he'll be meeting with an eclectic group of people. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and Twitter, he'll be meeting the Prime Minister today. He'll also be meeting Nobel laureates, folks from the film world. So the conversations will be with an eclectic group of people for about 3 or 4 hours in the second half of the day, from about 4 o'clock local time till about 8 o'clock or so. And then tomorrow is the big Yoga Day celebration that's going to happen here on the Upper East Side, next to the Turtle Bay at the UN headquarters, overlooking the East River, the beautiful setting of the North Lawns, where at 8 a.m. local time tomorrow, Prime Minister Modi will be leading the Yoga Day celebrations. Remember, it's after the Prime Minister became PM in 2014, and in 2015 is when the United Nations officially declared the 21st of June as International Day of Yoga. So the Prime Minister will be leading the Yoga Day celebrations, and then at 10:30 tomorrow morning, he leaves for Washington, D.C. In Washington, again, in the second half of the day tomorrow, he'll be having a series of engagements with CEOs, think tanks. Remember, the Beltway is heavily populated with think tanks, and there's a lot to talk about, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war, whether it is the looming threat of China, and of course, one very, very important issue that will feature very significantly in this visit is going to be critical emerging technologies. Just want to give you a sense of where we are. Like I said, if you've been to New York, this is Madison Avenue. On the left of Madison Avenue, you find the iconic Saks building, the Saks & Company building, the Saks Fifth Avenue, the famous fashion chain. They're just right around the corner. There's also the St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is again one of the oldest chapels here in New York City. And like I said, the Prime Minister will be staying here at Lotte, New York. And then tomorrow's events and functions will be at the UN headquarters. You can't see it from here, but it's sort of down the road and Upper East Side, where he will be leading the Yoga Day celebration. So it's going to be a packed day, both here in New York and, of course, tomorrow in the second half, he'll be headed out to Washington, D.C. And Thursday is the big day there for the ceremonial state visit and the state dinner, the banquet that will be hosted by President Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden.
Zakir, you spoke about the strategic cooperation in different areas, including technology, semiconductors. I want to talk specifically about the defense cooperation and the manner in which India and US are looking at this entire area. We had the US Defense Secretary and Indian Defense Minister who had about 2 weeks ago a very important and a crucial meeting. Perhaps there was a roadmap also that was agreed upon on the two sides. And keeping that into mind, what kind of build-up, what kind of deals are we expecting? What kind of understanding are we expecting? Is the effort of the United States also to ensure that India weans away from its reliance on the Russians, comes more towards the American side, keeping in mind that they see us as a long-term ally and perhaps a power that can help them contain China in the South Asian region?
So clearly, I mean, this has been a process that's been under works for the last 20 years or so. Remember, before the 1990s, India and the United States virtually had next to zero defense cooperation. That was because during the Cold War, India had sort of thrown its lot behind the USSR, the Soviet Union, whereas the US was sort of funding and giving military aid to Pakistan.
Yeah.
So that was the situation for the first 40 years since independence. Things started changing in the late 90s, early 2000s, not just in the defense relationship, but also in the strategic relationship in the mid 2000s when we were talking about the nuclear deal and making an exception for India. That was unprecedented. The United States had never made an exception for India for a non-NPT signatory.
Right.
So I think it started sometime in the late 90s, mid 2000s. There were these 4 foundational agreements which India signed. It was a process without which, of course, the US is barred by the US Congress from sharing any kind of defense transactions or even technology. So those 4 foundational agreements over a period of time, starting in the UPA era and then moving on to the NDA era, those foundational agreements got signed. Now what we're going to see during this visit is sort of the fruits of that foundational agreements being signed. One big deal that is expected to be announced is the GE jet engine deal, the F414 GE jet engines, which will be manufactured in India. Now, I think the important thing to underline is the transfer of technology. The India-US defense relationship up until now was by and large characterized as a bit like a transactional relationship, a buyer-seller relationship. The Americans sell and we buy. Whereas now, I think the next phase of defense cooperation is going to be about transfer of technology. It's going to be about making in India. So Indian officials are stressing on the fact that, according to them, at least by 80% of value, technology transfer will happen between GE and its and the counterpart that it's signing the agreement with, which is Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, to manufacture these jet engines, the 414s, which will then become the bulwark of the Tejas Mk2, the light combat aircraft. That's one big deal. The second one is the Predator armed drone. Now, if you go back and look at how the United States Army and its various services have been using unmanned aerial vehicles, you can go all the way back to the late 2000s during the war on terror. A lot of the high-profile Taliban targets were taken out by unmanned aerial vehicles, either operating in Afghanistan or operating in the tribal areas of Pakistan. So the Predator is sort of the bulwark. It was one of the first highly successful unmanned aerial vehicles used by the US military. Now we're given to understand that this will be another big deal that will be signed when the Prime Minister visits the US. We don't know the exact number of Predators that have been ordered or the orders have been placed for, but we're given to understand that all 3 services, the Army, Navy and the Air Force, were interested in the Predators. And you can see why. I mean, you just look at the Russia-Ukraine war and look at the kind of intensity and look at the kind of, damage that drones are causing, whether it is being used by the Russian side or even being used by the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians are also using both American-made drones, some of them even Turkish-made drones, and trying to attack targets deep inside Russia. So I think both sides here realize that the future of warfare is going to be unmanned, whether it is unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned submersible sea vehicles, and so on. So I think the thrust is going to be in that direction. And quickly before I wrap, critical emerging technologies. We saw Jake Sullivan, the US NSA, there last week. This is something that both sides are stressing on in a big way because they realize the importance of semiconductors. They realize, particularly after the COVID period, after this heightened rhetoric we're seeing between China and Taiwan, and the buzzword that US officials from the president downwards have been using for the last few months is de-risking from China. And they realize that the number one risk when it comes to China is a potential military confrontation with Taiwan. So semiconductors is going to be another big focus area of this visit.
All right. Thank you, Zaka, for getting us all the details on that crucial visit. And we'll continue coming back to Zaka as he tracks that very important visit, the first visit of Prime Minister's state visit to the United States of America. Well, joining us on the broadcast is a full panel of guests, Mr. Puneet Ahluwalia, who is the former candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia from the Republican Party, Raymond Vickery, who's a senior associate at the Vadwani Chair in India, US-India Policy Studies, Seema Sirohi, who's a columnist and author, and we also have Mr. Shashank, who's the former Foreign Secretary of India. Mr. Sanjay Puri, who's the chairperson of US-India Political Action Committee, is also with us on the broadcast. Thank you all. Good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I want to come to you first, Shashankji, and get in a view from you. This is the first state visit. He has visited US in the past in different capacity, but this is the first state visit. On the table right now is a lot of cooperation between the two sides on different issues. As we look forward to this visit, which is all set to commence officially in about 90 minutes from now as the Prime Minister makes the landing on the US soil, what are the key things to watch out for? There is so much on the table, but the one big thing that you're looking forward to?
There's a conscious decision on the part of the US President to raise the level of Indo-US relationship by inviting Prime Minister Modi for the state-level visit. So this is the third prime ministerial visit at the state guest level in the United States. And we have been talking about the partnership, the defining relationship between US and India for this century. But they were all building blocks, coming up to the apex of the relationship. At the same time, there were many other worries on both sides. India was worried about Pakistan getting arms from the Americans being dependent on Pakistan in Afghanistan scenario, America-China relationship. So therefore, we were not very clear as to what extent US would go with India. But I think now President Biden has given a clear signal with this. Now, we have to just work on it. There might be some more time. So we'll have to just see how the visit goes.
How the visit goes. Raymond Victory, coming to you and talking about the factor called China. And as my colleague Zaka Jacob was also pointing out, de-risking from China is something that the most, superpowers across the world are looking forward to, especially the United States of America, keeping in mind that the Chinese have openly challenged the kind of hegemony of sorts that US enjoys across the world as the leading superpower. In terms of creating those strategic ties with India, keeping in mind the Chinese threat in different capacities, not just on the trade front, but in the Indo-Pacific region and the various concerns that the Americans have expressed, how critical is this partnership between India and the Americans?
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's very critical. Obviously, India has more in common with the United States and democracy than it does with China, an autocracy who does not have a respect for the rule of law, who claims an entire Indian state, Arunachal Pradesh, as its own, and other areas along the border. China has shown that it is not a part of the international system when it comes to the South China Sea, to the free movement of vessels, and really the concentration on building peace and prosperity as opposed to national aggrandizement. So there is a huge commonality with China. I think the basic and most important thing, though, that'll come out of the Modi-Biden visit is a continuation along the path of not just having a transactional relationship between the U.S. and India. It's all well and good to say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and therefore we work together. It is an entirely different thing to say we have things in common across the globe, which we want as two great world powers to work together on. And I think Prime Minister Modi's interview recently in regard to Ukraine is indicative of the relationship moving in that direction. When he says that India has made its position very clear, it's in favor of peace. It's not in favor of war. It's in favor of the respect for the rule of law and international boundaries. And this will all be promoted by
I'm very sorry, sir. I'm interrupting you there, but there's a press conference happening by John Kirby. We're cutting across live to that briefing.
Global order. As we think about the future of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and building resilient supply chains for clean energy technologies, semiconductors, and other critical and emerging technology, countering climate change, the future of our workforces, and global health, energy, food security, there is no partner more consequential than India. And We're hosting India for an official state visit to put our cooperation on an inexorable trajectory as we support India's emergence as a great power that will be central to ensuring U.S. interests in the coming decades. After years of strengthening our ties, the United States-India partnership is deeper and more expansive than it has ever been in the past. We now look instinctively to each other and work cooperatively with each other to uphold a free and open Indo-Pacific, to drive innovation, jointly tackle global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Together, and working with other like-minded partners, our countries will shape the future, working towards a world that, again, is open and more prosperous, more stable, more secure, and quite frankly, more resilient. Now, we'll take some questions. Let's see, who's in the front here? Go ahead.
Thank you, John. I wanted to touch a little bit, if you could, in the how much Ukraine is going to be. Oh, of course, sorry. I'm Beatriz. I'm with EFE, news agency in Spanish. I wanted to ask about Ukraine. Ukraine has been proposing for months now. They have been proposing a peace summit.
Well, that was the White House briefing. We'll continue a close eye on all the developments happening at the White House ahead of the crucial visit of the Prime Minister. Guests continue to be with us on the broadcast. Sorry for that interruption. I want to cut back to Mr. Raymond Vickery. Mr. Vickery, I'm very sorry. Your point was interrupted. But you were pointing out to the various and numerous reasons why the ties between the Indians and the Americans are likely to deepen further. And this is the long-term relationship in the making. It has been for a while, but it's expected to pick up momentum much more than ever before.
I think it will pick up more momentum. And the really good news from the U.S. side is that the Republicans and the Democrats agree at least on one thing, and that is that the U.S.-India relationship should be strong.
Yeah.
As you know, Prime Minister Modi will be addressing the Congress as well as interacting with the executive branch. And I'm happy to report with my dealings with the Congress that there is broad bipartisan support. The question is whether or not we can find common ground across the globe on the values which unite the U.S. and India, rather than just making it, am I going to buy arms from you? Am I going to help you out in regard to Ukraine?
Yeah.
We have much more in common, and that is a good sign.
That is a good sign. I want to cut across to Mr. Sanjay Puri as well. Mr. Puri, a development beyond the transactional relationship between the Indian and Americans. We're talking about U.S. trying to woo India, trying to wean away the dependence that we have had on the Russians, but especially when it came to the war in Ukraine, or whether it was about the purchase of oil and what benefits better for India and its domestic interests. India made a very clear statement on the global platform, and it stuck by the stand it took. Despite objection coming in from different countries, sometimes muted, sometimes openly put out on the table. Now, talking about this cooperation and the willingness that Indians are ready to put on the table. How willing is India, and to what extent are we hedging our bets in terms of having the right kind of strategic partners? We have had deep ties with Russia. We also want to engage with a neighbor like China, and at the same time have good relationships, in fact, better relationship with a partner like United States of America. So how is India looking at the entire situation?
Thank you for having me. The reality is this is a different India than ever it has been before. It's a confident, it's important and aspirational India with a population of the youngest population in the world and a prime minister who's confident. The reception that he's getting, I've been there, and Ray Vickery can tell you, it's never been seen before. So this is not a transactional relationship, whether it's the Republicans, the Democrats. This relationship is now at an upward trajectory. Some of the things that you're going to see, the announcements, will tell you that this is a very strategic partnership. And there's a respect in the United States that India has to make its own choices, whether it is for Ukraine, whether it is for the S-400s, etc. You will not hear too much protest coming from the United States because this is an important relationship for a variety of reasons. It's the only democracy in a very tough neighborhood with two nuclear neighbors that they have. It's a huge marketplace, shared values. So you're going to see some key announcements. John Kirby talked about it. Your associate talked about it.
Yep.
The unarmed drone, the unmanned drones, that's a very significant thing. AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, space technology. You're going to hear a lot about space technology because the future warfare and economic opportunities are in this. And the United States is opening its kimono and saying, here, we want you to get the best of what we have. And that's never ever happened before. So I think this is a seminal moment for India, and they should be very, very happy because it's really a recognition of 140 crore people that the Prime Minister talks about their work that has brought this country to this point.
Henry Kissinger famously said, only our interests are something which are dominating and perpetual and eternal in a certain way. And foreign policy in that sense is all about pursuing your domestic and global interests. That's what Americans are doing. And perhaps they align with the positioning, the strong positioning that the Indians have taken on the global platform on a host of issues. I want to cut across to Mr. Puneet Ahluwalia as well, who's been patiently listening to this entire discussion. Mr. Ahluwalia, there's an interesting aspect that I want to discuss. We were talking about China and how the threat of the Chinese is something that makes US more keen and perhaps urgent in the way and manner they want to engage with India. There was also this US visit by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was in Beijing recently. And are we going to see more of the cooling down in relation between US and China? And the fact that Mr. Blinken was there, Taiwan was one issue that was on the table that was discussed. There were certain statements that were also issued on this. How do you see the visit of Mr. Blinken and the kind of red carpet which was being laid out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
Well, I think Biden administration is trying to make a statement about their foreign policy, having Secretary Blinken have a very successful visit so far in China, apparently trying to approach peace again. Peace through strength, which has been America's motto, especially under President Trump. But more importantly, what the red carpet welcome for Prime Minister Modi is also a very important sign for China that the entire relationship, which is now Indo-Pacific, we used to call it Asia-Pacific, now we call it Indo-Pacific, predominantly to show the importance of the strategic geography and most importantly, the confident India, as my good friend Sanjay Puri said, is to project the importance of India and the leadership of India, which has kind of evolved. And especially under Prime Minister Modi, I think what he did is he has really not just spoken for the developing nations, he's become the leader of the masses all across from Middle East to from Africa to Middle East to Asian nations, because he said he has shared with the United States leadership that this world is interconnected and interdependent. And everything cannot just be this global power. The failure of United Nations has to change. Countries like India and other nations have to play an important role. And I have to commend Prime Minister Modi in doing so. And that's also a success of the large Indian diaspora, which for the years have worked hard and persevered and have strengthened this relationship to reach this stage. So I think it's a success all around. And I do appreciate my American leaders who have recognized the strength and importance of India and the growing confidence in India, which is only going to go in the right direction. But at the same time, when we talk about shared values, we talk about democracy. You see, in Washington, we have a 15-second attention span and things can change. And they do change, as you know that very well. So it's important that we keep working this relationship, keep cementing it. And at the same time, it's a message to despots, autocrat, that this partnership or the relationship, the free-thinking people will always succeed. And as Prime Minister Modi said, that we want to have peace around the world. So that's how the countries will
Mr. Ahluwalia,
succeed and the people will succeed. It's ultimately about the people.
I'm going to pick up on what you said about the leadership for the developing nations and trying to put the issues of the developing nations, say various African countries on the table.
Sure.
This is also the moment, and I take this point to Shashankji, who's with us on the broadcast, picking up from what Mr. Ahluwalia said. Now, with the G20 presidency that India has at this point in time, the global South remains unrepresented right now in G20. The idea is to put that concern on the table in terms of being included in G20 and various other development issues that have dominated the discourse. This was also highlighted by the Indian Foreign Secretary, Mr. Vinay Mohan Kwatra. But how would that be possible? Keeping in mind that there are major countries in G20 like China and Russia, and a lot of them don't see eye to eye. How can India use its leadership position to assert about these dominating issues, which should be discussed more often on these global platforms? Shashankji.
Well, G20 has given an opportunity to India to explain the views of the global South. And one thing which India has done is to have a virtual meeting with all the important countries of global South. Secondly, India has now proposed that African Union should be made a member of the G20. Thirdly, India knows that it's an aspirant to become the permanent member of the UN Security Council. But here what we are finding, that all permanent members of the UN Security Council are having trouble among themselves. There's US, and along with its friends, UK and France, and on the other hand, Russia and China. So therefore, if G20 can play a role, India is trying to build up that role. But we are finding again and again, the Western countries are asking that G20 should concentrate only on Ukraine. So that is the problem. So India has to convince the United States. And I think this is a great opportunity which we are finding now with President Biden having taken a very clear-cut decision that India has to be in a different league of relations with USA. It's not Pakistan, it's not China. It's in the league with the highest technology levels where they are willing to share things with us. They would like to build up in the critical and emerging technologies. That means for future. Quantum computing and space and all these kind of things. So I'm not talking of the past. So we'll have to work on it quite a lot. I'm not very sure whether India is prepared for everything as yet, because we remember that ChatGPT founder, Sam Altman, he came to India and he said, look, he doesn't see India setting up any new artificial intelligence platforms.
So Shashankji, I want to understand this more from you so that I can discuss it with our other guests and experts on the broadcast. When you say, are we really prepared for this? What are the concerns that are dominating your mind right now?
No, what I find is that we have been under sanctions for such a long time. From the Americans and the Western powers, that we are trying to come out of it. And every time we find that the mindset among many departments in the US government and NGOs and academics and others, they still feel that India, which was a colonial territory for such a long time, can perhaps be again pushed around. And like they supplied hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the First and Second World War, so maybe they can be made to give more soldiers for China war and for Russia-Ukraine war. So that is the problem which Indians have, that they want that our best brains are going to the US, best brains are going abroad. Why can't we have the best brains work in India also, along with USA? So therefore, that is the responsibility which we are like to take on for future technology.
All right, picking on that point, Mr. Raymond Vickery, President Biden has said that India is an indispensable partner, and in fact, there's bipartisan support coming in for the long-term partnership and commitment with India as a key ally, looking at the manner in which the global geopolitical equations are framing and the manner in which China is rising in clearly perplexing ways for the rest of the world, including Americans. But India is yet not part of critical groupings. Say, for example, AUKUS, even in Quad right now, for that matter, it looks more aimed at counterbalancing China. So in terms of finding the right ground and the right positioning with the Americans, what would it take?
Well, I think the American position is very clear in terms of the role which U.S. And India should play together in these international institutions. The United States has advocated for some time that India be made a part of the Security Council of the United Nations. China has blocked that. We've done everything we can in terms of normalizing relationships in regard to civil nuclear matters. So I think that is the case. The real question, it seems to me, is whether or not India is willing to look forward rather than backward toward a colonial era in which it needed to express its complete independence from other actors, and whether or not it will be willing to share on its side its most sacred technologies and its most sacred approaches to economic matters. It is the case that we're making great progress, but nobody should be under the illusion that India and the United States are in the position that they ought to be. And that is, in my judgment, that we ought to be working together across the board and willing to share based upon values, as well as how much the transaction benefits either side.
How much the transaction benefits the either side, and as I said, the interest on both the sides is something that the Indians Americans would be negotiating. Mr. Sanjay Puri, this is indeed a country and India which has shed its colonial past and baggage. And even in terms of foreign policy, most experts would agree that there's a very strategic, clear-cut position that India has taken with much clarity, without any kind of political or diplomatic vagueness on the global stage, on the Indo-nuclear, on the Ukraine war, or for that matter, the manner in which we decided to buy oil from certain countries, despite the displeasure by various Western nations. A clean break from what we have pursued so far, is that something which is possible, Mr. Puri?
I think India has its own destiny in its own hand. I mean, the thing is, you have the youngest population in the world. You have a democracy. You don't interfere in other countries' affairs. You don't tell others what to do, unlike so many countries. It's a country with tremendous talent, whether it's technology talent, whether it's healthcare or things of that nature. It's the pharmacy of the world, so to speak. So it'll build its own strategic ties. Its relationship with the United States should be what works best for India, and its relationship with Russia and others should be just like United States does the same to it too. And I think India, as you said, is taking a very measured approach by pushing the global south and pushing the African Union, because the current world configurations, as some of our colleagues already mentioned, are broken. The UN Security Council and some of these other trade organizations, the United States walked out of some of these trade organizations, trade agreements also themselves. So now is the time for new configurations, whether it is, a trade agreement, whether it's an investment agreement. India has now the world in its hands because of what it has done. And I think you will see that with some of the announcements that are coming out.
Absolutely.
That there is not going to be, this is not an apology tour by Prime Minister Modi for buying oil from some countries or doing this. This is not an apology tour. This is a state dinner, address to joint session,
and a red carpet which has been rolled out, as you point out, Mr. Puri. My last question to Mr. Puneet Ahluwalia, and I want to talk a bit about the excitement that has been building up, especially in the Indian American community. The diaspora, there are various members which are going to be present. Of course, there are events, big ticket events also that have been planned, dinners that have been planned. What kind of enthusiasm, what kind of support? He has a personal brand and charisma that he carries as he travels to different nations, including the United States. So what kind of momentum, what kind of excitement?
I think Prime Minister Modi has a way, because he's a grassroots leader, he's always had a way to gravitate people towards him. Charismatic in his own way, great auditor. I guess, and we have a large, I think the religion has played a very important role, because he's brought certain respect and recognition to the Hinduism, the yoga, the cultural aspect of India. And I guess that's what kind of gravitates people, and they feel proud and exude pride on that recognition. But I also want to say something. This is, you have to realize, you have to give a lot of commend India and its leadership through Nehru all the way till Prime Minister Modi. The way it's graduated, India is a very divided nation. At the same time, it's a united nation as a country. And for this country to persevere through democracies, and unlike other nations, look at Pakistan, it's a basket case right now, and other Asian African nations where the democracy suffocates every day. And I have to say that India has shown the world, and the Indian diaspora has shown the world, that if you have disciplined certain values, which we are very proud to have as a proud Indian, I'm very
at the
proud
university,
from
Mr.
India,
Ahluwalia, as a student of political science, when we would study democracies and we would study the ingredients to sustain a democracy, our professors would often say that India is an outlier. Most countries that got their independence post 47 have not been able to sustain democracy effectively and successfully. India has. And clearly that takes a lot. And all eyes on that big visit. I'm very grateful to all of you for joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Puneet Ahluwalia, Raymond Victory, Seema Sirohi, Shashank, Mr. Sanjay Puri. Thank you all for joining us this evening. This is the big story that we'll continue tracking here on CNN News 18, that power-packed visit and the first state visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States.
It's a big week for Indian diplomacy as Prime Minister Narendra Modi comes for his first ever state visit to the United States. Join me, Zaka Jacob, as I'll be live both from here, New York City, as well as Washington, D.C., as we discuss the defense deals that are likely to be signed, the Indo-US strategic cooperation, the growing threat of China, and of course, the long shadow of the Russia-Ukraine war. All that and more, all through this week. Special broadcasts from America here on CNN News 18.
And now on to another big story of the day. Ahead of the Panchayat elections, you would think that the concern of the state government of West Bengal would be free and fair elections. In fact, the West Bengal State Election Commission actually came to the Supreme Court against the order of the High Court, where they gave the permission for the deployment of central forces. And ahead of the Panchayat elections on the July 8, the Supreme Court dismissed the Bengal Election Commission's plea against the Calcutta High Court for the deployment of central forces in the state. Now, the Apex Court has said that the State Election Commission should not have any grievance with the High Court's direction on the deployment of central forces in every district. The court believes that this would ensure free and fair elections in the state of West Bengal. You also have a certain degree and a great degree of political war of words going on this entire matter. BJP State President Sukanta Majumdar, he even met Governor C.V. Anand Bose to discuss the security situation. There were instances of sporadic violence that were reported across the state, with about 5 reported deaths so far. In fact, a peace room has been established at Raj Bhavan in Kolkata for people to register their complaints, much to the annoyance of the state government. So far, more than 350 complaints have been filed with the portal. BJP has accused the TMC of intimidating voters and candidates. TMC has accused the BJP of engineering the crisis. Once again, political violence synonymous with the state of West Bengal. The big question is politics above law and order? And when it comes to ensuring peaceful elections, shouldn't the focus of state government be on free and fair elections instead of focusing on who is guarding the state? Our focus on brass tacks.
Wanted to contest in Panchayat election from opposition ticket, but right now they can't go back to their home.
हम लोग वीडियो ऑफिस में नॉमिनेशन देने के लिए गए थे, लेकिन वहाँ पर बहुत माफिया रस चल रहा है, किसी को घुसने नहीं दिया। वो शेख शाहजहां है, वो किसी को उस वीडियो ऑफिस के पास जाने नहीं दे रहा है।
सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ये जो राय आया है, verdict आया है, हम इसकी वेलकम करते हैं, सराहना करते हैं।
Trinamool Congress works for the people at large throughout the year under the guidance of Madam Mamata Banerjee. So during the election, Trinamool Congress is very much confident to be bestowed upon by the blessings of the common people during the poll.
So what's more important, politics or a free and fair election process without any instances of violence? Joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Tausif Rahman, who's the spokesperson of TMC, Mr. Jayanta Ghoshal, who's a senior journalist. We're also expecting Mr. Shishir Bajoria from the BJP to join us in just a bit from now. Mr. Rahman, first to you. What was the preliminary objection of the TMC or the state government of West Bengal, or the State Election Commission to be precise, if the central forces were to be deployed? This is to ensure law and order situation in the state, and the Supreme Court found no merit in the argument of the State Election Commissioner.
Ma'am, good evening. Ma'am, to save the democracy and to save our people and to have a fair election, we can go to any extent. And actually, you see, we have a different pattern that we don't mind the central force. But when you are targeting the ruling government that they are not being able to control anything now, that's where we have a problem. And central force deployment is nothing new in West Bengal. It was there in 2008, 2013, 16, 19, 21 as well. But I don't think so central force was helpful of any kind. Nothing changed. Whoever wanted to do anything and they wanted to do. Now the problem is that, like, if under the leadership of Amit Shah, Suvendu Adhikari is getting all the messages, and why don't they come forward and just say it one time that ISF, BJP, Congress, Left Front are working together and they want a massacre in Bengal. So we could handle it. Imagine, ma'am, if you are roaming with a TMC jhanda, with a bomb in your hand, and then you say that Bengal is becoming a cottage industry of an bomb, something like that. We are not going to accept that. But yes, of course, when you will ask about the security of the people, we are not backing out. It is absolutely Mamata Banerjee, the Honorable Chief Minister of Bengal, is truly responsible to take care of everything. And I assure you, everything will be in place.
Mr. Rahman, five people have lost their lives.
Not five, ma'am. Not five. More than 12.
Yes, so far the official number which has been attributed to political violence can be 5, and you might have the ground reports that tell you the numbers are much higher. Coming to the number of deaths that have happened. Sir, 1 second. Please listen to my question and then you can make your point, sir. Mr. Rahman, the point here is not what the BJP is doing. The point here is not the kind of politics which is happening. If people are losing their lives because of political violence, whether it's the state police force or whether it's the central agencies, an elected state government which is duty bound to protect its citizens should not have any problem. Why would you go to Supreme Court and say, look, we don't want central forces, they come and create problem in the state? Why would you even say that?
Because there's only one reason. Because if you make a mockery out of a central government that we are not being liable to do anything, we don't have that capacity, we are not capable of doing anything, spreading a fake narrative that this government is totally a failure. So that is a problem. If something is happening in Bengal, we need to stop that. Ma'am, I would like to state this in clear terms that Trinamool Congress is not involved in this incidents of violence. The party leadership has issued strong instruction to booth workers and to refrain from any violence and make sure that the entire nomination procedure remains free and fair. We have seen that over 1 lakh nominations have been filed by different political parties until June 14. And what is the today report? By BJP is just 1% behind. They are standing in number 2nd with the nomination. But why they are crying foul? Why they want a massacre? They don't have to do that. We can't take all the blames.
Those are some very strong words that you're using, that BJP or other political parties want a massacre in the state. I want to cut across to Mr. Jayanta Ghoshal as well. Mr. Ghoshal, to what extent do you find the arguments of Mr. Rahman plausible? I mean, as a student of law, I only think that it's important that the state should be peaceful and secure. It doesn't matter if it's the state police or the CISF or the CRPF which is guarding the state. The focus should be on law and order and ensuring free and fair elections. Mr. Ghoshal.
Actually, I have a different take on this violence issue. Because, for the last 40 years, I am covering this West Bengal politics. I have not seen any single election, not even Panchayat, any single election without any violence. So, my perception is that there is a DNA of political violence in West Bengal politics. And I remember when Advani ji was the Home Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, there was a DG conference in Bigyan Bhavan. And that time, political violence, the first boy was West Bengal. And, this caste violence, communal violence is a different. That was more actually, that time it was more in UP and Bihar. Sushil Sinde became Home Minister, Congress Jamana, and that time also the same report. So there is a DNA, and when Siddharth Sankara was the Chief Minister, the lumpen elements, they used to do the violence. And it was the inheritance of those lumpen, we used to call lumpen proletariat. They actually inducted in the CPM structure, and in that particracy, Panchayat, it is a major three-tier system, what actually, instituted in the left front time very successfully, and political violence also was maximum in CPM terror. Mamta, that time, she was against that violence because she was the opposition. She used to go to the president of
Mr.
India
Ghoshal,
also.
why is it...
Memorandum. Now in TMC, in TMC, that lumpen elements is a law of nature. After 10 years of the regime, those elements are inside TMC, state subject, law and order. So TMC has to take the responsibility
Mr. Ghoshal,
also.
I have a lot of
Manipur,
respect
something happens. We blame Manipur government for that.
To the decades of experience with which you're speaking here right now. But because of the paucity of time, I'm making this interjection to you. When the TMC government says that there is nothing wrong that the state government is doing, or for that matter, there is no TMC worker which is involved in any kind of violence, do you really buy that argument? Mr. Shishir Bajoria is also with us on the broadcast, but first, Mr. Ghoshal, please.
No, Anusha, actually, the political party, I'm not wearing any jersey of any political party.
Right.
I think in TMC also, there are guns. And BJP, who is the beneficiary out of this controversy, who is making the issue? It's an issue for BJP because the political violence is a very important issue. And BJP can go to the election commission, BJP can go to the... So what Mamta did when Mamta was opposition, now BJP as a successful opposition party in Bengal, you just see what was BJP and what is BJP today.
Absolutely.
But what you are saying, I agree with you. Because, the paramilitary force also dependent on state police. So it's a issue of federalism.
Exactly. And to politicize the security forces, I think is taking the argument to another level. Mr. Shishir Bajoria, before you were able to join the discussion, I was having a discussion with Mr. Tausif Rahman from the TMC. He is with us on the broadcast. And there were certain very strong words which the TMC is using here. They're saying that parties like BJP should make it abundantly clear if they want to have a massacre in the state of West Bengal. The entire violence is instigated by the BJP, and then they cry victims and go to a high court or a Supreme Court to seek relief. That's the argument that the TMC is making, sir. Respond.
Well, very clearly, Anusha, what Tausif Bhai is saying is beyond saying laughable, beyond laughable. If we are the instigators of violence, what is West Bengal police doing? Why aren't they catching us? He has forgotten Boktui. 15 people were burned to death. The chief minister herself goes there and says the police came late because the TMC leader called the police late. I'm quoting only the chief minister. I was watching the program while I couldn't log in for some technical reason. He even said getting CAPF is normal. So what's so great about it? Oh wow! I really appreciate that statement. Then I have a very simple question. Why did the state government and its partisan election commission go to Supreme Court? And what did Supreme Court today say? Supreme Court made two observations. Both the state government and the partisan state election commission's head should be hanging in shame. For the state government, Supreme Court's observation was election is not a license for violence, not a license for violence. And for the election commission, they said, we are surprised that you have come on appeal against the central force. And the representative of Trinamool here says it's normal to get central force. What happens with Bhaiya, aisa hai, central force does not vote. Central force is not your West Bengal police. West Bengal police catches a Trinamool person with a revolver, catches. And it is heard in the TV channel that the cop standing next to him is saying,
no, that's an interesting point you've made. And I think the point about federal structure is also an interesting. Mr. Rahman, isn't the TMC and your leaders talk about the federal structure, remind the BJP not to be autocratic? Then where is the entire respect for federal structure gone right now? I mean, what is the problem in having the central forces being deployed in the state of West Bengal to maintain law and order? Isn't this cooperation the soul of Indian democracy and the manner in which the federal structure really operates? Mr. Rahman.
This is what I wanted to explain you when Sisir ji just said that there's goons from TMC carrying guns and having bombs and everything. They don't have any proof. They are just going to the state police, putting FIR. They are running to the Supreme Court. They are going to the High Court. But I just want to know that why don't they declare that they are working with ISF? What happened in Bhangar, I want to explain you in 30 seconds. Now, these people went to ISF leaders and they wanted to attack TMC. How this all started? This is the problem where Didi suspended a lot of leaders when she came to know this is what is happening. She strictly said that I am not going to entertain such incident in Bengal, whether you are from TMC, BJP or whatsoever. Now, overnight, what happened that we decided that there are certain elements, bad elements, which we are not going
Mr.
to
Rahman,
give them
how are you
tickets.
so sure? You have lakhs of people as your party workers. How are you so sure about each party worker within the TMC? Can't there be lumpen elements?
Ma'am, let me explain
You also have a senior journalist with 30 decades of experience saying that yes, there are lumpen elements within the TMC.
I totally respect Jantada. No, I totally respect Jantada. I never spoke over him. So now the problem is that when we denied those tickets, ma'am, you have to know and you should get these reports. Now, these people went and joined BJP immediately. And now they are the one who started this circus all over Bengal.
So have
now,
you arrested all of them?
Have you arrested
all of them?
That
have
yes,
you arrested all of
people
them?
who have started these. So this blame game will never stop. But yes, TMC is standing like a Mount Everest.
Okay.
We know what to do. We will take care of our
I'm short of time. A closing comment from Mr. Shishir Bajoria. Yes, Mr. Bajoria. Please go ahead.
Very quickly, one line only. If what Tausif Bhai is saying, if it is correct, pakde kyun nahi bhai? The fact is, yesterday we took 30 people who are, they're just a small sample. There are lakhs, well not lakhs, thousands who have had to flee from their home. All our 55,000 nominee holders of candidature.
All stories.
To the governor.
Maybe you people should start. You will face Shakespeare and Macbeth and Hamlet.
All right, Mr. Ghoshal, I'm very sorry to give you this limited time of 20 or 30 seconds. But Mr. Ghoshal, will we ever see end to this political violence? You pointed out to the decades of violence that has existed in the state. Even a panchayat election or local body election is not without it. What will end this violence?
You know, after 40 years of my journalism, I have become very cynical. You know, in Bihar and UP, political violence was there. I have seen when Mayawati was chief minister, what happened in the assembly. I was in that day. When TN Seshan and Lalu, I saw the political violence. But I have to admit one fact. It's not against TMC or against BJP. But in UP, in the last Yogi Adityanath's election, when the Pura Nigam, I mean the municipal election was there, not a single death took place.
Yes.
So why Bengal? I am not blaming Mamata Banerjee for that, but perhaps their political DNA, we have to change. Maybe the socio-economic factors, we don't have time. Otherwise, I can discuss that issue. On the socio-economic issue, the bomb should not be the factory. The heavy industry should be the main priority of our state. So
if a state like Uttar Pradesh can do it,
tomorrow, in the power, these guns will go to BJP.
If a state like UP can do it, why can't the state of West Bengal do it? I'm completely out of time. Mr. Shishir Bajoria, Mr. Tausif Rahman, Jayant Ghoshal. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. We'll continue tracking this story and much more here on Brass Tacks. It's a wrap on this edition. Thank you so much for watching.
As the NCP has said in the last few days, that today is ostensibly the Traitors' Day, because today was the day when Eknath Shinde, along with a bunch of MLAs, had jumped fences and had gone to Surat. Back to you.
Also, Vinaya, do we have any reaction from the Shinde Sena on this Traitors' Day remark?
Well, for the last 2 to 3 days, these remarks have been, made, and that is why we have seen that Eknath Shinde himself, while in his address on the Foundation Day, had spoken about it. Today, as such, there is no fresh response. This is not a fresh war of words anyway. For the last 2 to 3 days, we have seen these kind of reactions go on and off. And to that, Eknath Shinde and his faction have also responded, slamming Uddhav Thackeray and his faction, saying that, we saw even on stage yesterday, Gajanan Kesar spoke about it, saying that they should not really be called traitors because the reason why the previous government came down was not because of anybody else, but because of the kind of troubles that the Shiv Sainik faced at the hands of the NCP, which was taking away and extracting all the funds as well as not giving any prominence to the Shiv Sena. And that was the main reason why the MLAs who felt stifled while sitting in the Mahavikas Aghadi had to actually leave, and that was the main reason that should not be neglected. So we have seen response on this jibe come up from Eknath Shinde and his faction for the last 2 to 3 days. As of today, after Sanjay Raut's tweet, we haven't yet seen any response from them. Back to you.
Also, Vinya, how is this going to impact the Shinde Sena's image, given that assembly polls are also around the corner next year that are going to happen in Maharashtra? So how is this going to impact the party's image?
Well, we have seen that internally surveys that have been conducted by the Eknath Shinde group do not seem to be favorable for them as of now. They are completely aware that there is some amount of backlash because of the decision that they have taken, and they will have to work their way through. So there is a clear recognition of the challenge because of the narrative that is being used. Also, very simply, Shiv Sena Uddhav Thackeray faction is playing the victim card and is claiming that, time and again, these are the people who received them. We saw the same line that was taken up by Uddhav Thackeray as well in his Foundation Day speech yesterday, saying that, they have stabbed the womb of a mother, and that is how they have gone through. Narrative building with respect to the cadres and to general population, which has been a Shiv Sena follower, has been that the Uddhav Thackeray faction has been at the receiving end and that it has been the victim in this entire game. Now, unless that perception changes, it clearly remains to be a challenge for the Eknath Shinde faction, which it is fully aware of. And that is why we are seeing that despite all these accusations and counter-accusations, Eknath Shinde faction has been in full swing in order to make sure that several leaders of the Uddhav Thackeray faction jump on to the Eknath Shinde faction. Back to you.
All right, Vinaya, please stay with us. We have Shiv Sena UBT's Anand Dubey joining us on the broadcast. आनंद दुबे जी, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया CNN News 18 से जुड़ने के लिए। आपकी पार्टी ने एक डिमांड करी है कि जून 20 को ट्रेटर्स डे डिक्लेयर कर देना चाहिए। इस पे आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
देखिए, ऐसा जैसे कि हम लोग कहते हैं ना कि आज भाई विश्व का योगा दिवस है, आज अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा दिवस है, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय पर्यावरण दिवस है, ऐसे हम लोग कहते हैं। उसी प्रकार आज ही के दिन महाराष्ट्र में एक ऐसी घटना घटी थी जो दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण थी। एक रनिंग सरकार को कुछ लोगों ने षड्यंत्र करके गिरा दिया था, गद्दारी करके गिरा दिया था। तो उसके बाद उन्हीं समय के बीजेपी के और शिवसेना, जो कथित शिवसेना, उनके नेताओं ने कहा था कि 35 देशों ने इसकी जानकारी ली है, इसको देखा है। तो जब एक देश से मामला कई देशों में चला गया, तब ये तो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय हो गया। तो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय हो ही गया है, तो क्यों ना फिर इसका दिवस भी मनाया जाए कि भाई आज ही के दिन गद्दारी हुई थी और पूरी दुनिया को समझ में आए कि देखिए, किसी को मदद करके, किसी को ताकत देकर आप बड़ा बनाते हैं, एक दिन वो इतना बड़ा बनना चाहता है कि आपको ही समाप्त कर देता है, आपके अस्तित्व पर ही चैलेंज खड़ा कर देता है। तो इस प्रकार से चिट्ठी लिखी गई है। अब चूंकि अब संजय राउत साहब ने चिट्ठी लिखी है यूनाइटेड नेशन के प्रमुख को, देखते हैं क्या होता है।
जी, आनंद दुबे जी, आप बने रहिए हमारे साथ बीजेपी से तुहीन सिन्हा भी जुड़ रहे हैं। मिस्टर सिन्हा, वेरी गुड मॉर्निंग टू यू। सो Shiv Sena UBT has been demanding that June 20th should be declared as Traitors Day, since this was the day when Shinde faction merged with the BJP and formed the government, and they decided to part ways with the Mahavikas Aghadi. What's your take on this?
Good morning. Well, Sanjay Raut clearly needs psychiatric help. And if he has written this letter with the permission of Uddhav ji, then I'm afraid the entire Uddhav Sena also needs psychiatric help. You know, first of all, this is an internal matter of the country. To make it a public spectre for the world shows the immaturity of Uddhav Sena, shows that they are They are ill-equipped. They are incapable of, conducting themselves in the Indian democracy.
Today, NCP will be protesting in Pune to mark Traitors' Day. Now, Shiv Sena UBT MP Sanjay Raut has written a letter to you.
Hello and welcome to Vantage USA. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Behind me is the Washington Monument. It's countdown time here. Just a short while from now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be landing in the United States. He will touch down at the Andrews Air Base in Maryland. From there, he will leave for New York. This is the first leg of this all-important visit. The Prime Minister has some meetings lined up. One of them is with Elon Musk. So lots to watch out for in New York. The second leg of the trip is here in Washington, D.C. Modi will meet President Biden. He will attend a state dinner. It's a big honor for visiting leaders in the U.S. All in all, things are looking good for India and America. But some usual suspects are not happy. They're trying hard to sabotage this visit, to derail this important relationship. We'll tell you who they are and what their plan is. Also, what is the history of this relationship? India was twice sanctioned by the United States in the last century. How did sanctions turn to state visits? We'll answer all of that on today's show. But first, the headlines. Russia launches air attacks across Ukraine. Kiev says its air force shot down 32 of 35 drones. Ukraine warns that the biggest blow in its counteroffensive is yet to come. Moscow threatens retaliation if West-supplied weapons are used by Ukraine to strike Crimea. Crisis in Pakistan fails to secure supply of liquefied natural gas. This was their first attempt to do so in about a year. They floated a tender to purchase 6 ships